Welcome to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't, a podcast dedicated to helping you create the relationship you truly want.
Emotional vulnerability in relationships, how sharing your inner world deepens trust and connection. We all want closeness in our relationships, yet the very thing that creates it, emotional vulnerability, is often what we fear the most. Opening up can feel risky or even unsafe, especially if we've been hurt before. And yet, again and again, research, lived experience, and even TV moments show us that vulnerability is not weakness. It's the bridge to trust, intimacy, and meaningful connection. Today, we're exploring what it really means to open up in relationships and why it has the power to transform our life. Opening up often feels uncomfortable or even terrifying because of a fear of being judged. Many people have learned, often very early, that sharing emotions can lead to rejection, misunderstanding, or pain. So we protect ourselves by staying guarded, self-reliant, or emotionally reserved. We not only dodge answers to questions that others ask, we also sidestep sharing authentically because it's easier. Many couples and close relationships struggle not because of conflict, but because of emotional distance. Conversations stay practical, parenting or roommate roles stay intact, but deeper feelings go unspoken. Over time, this lack of vulnerability can erode intimacy and leave people feeling unseen or disconnected. Shame is just one obstacle to sharing more truthfully. And actually, vulnerability is the best weapon against shame. I'm going to say that again. It's so important. Vulnerability is the best weapon against shame. You can see the truth of this in AA meetings, where people share their secrets to an audience, which diffuses the shame and creates connections. As you listen today, I invite you to reflect on your own relationship and your own vulnerability or lack of it. What did you learn about sharing emotions growing up? Were your feelings welcomed, minimized, or ignored? These early experiences shape how we show up in relationships now. This episode is an opportunity to consider new ways of connecting more deeply and authentically. My guest today is celebrated Harvard professor and behavioral scientist Leslie John, PhD, widely known for her incredibly popular Harvard courses and expertise in the psychology of self-disclosure decisions and how they impact all relationships in our lives. Her book published when?
February 24th, 2026.
Okay, is revealing the underrated power of oversharing. Thanks so much for taking time to join me and my audience today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So in your first chapter, you talk about how hard it is to know when there is TMI, which everybody knows, or TLI, too little information. And I loved that balance because everybody talks about TMI, but not TLI. So I really am excited to have you because I think this is such an important topic. In fact, you also say, quote, "My research on disclosure decisions has illuminated just how difficult it can be to adjudicate between too much information and too little," unquote. Could we begin by you talking about why this is so hard to sort?
Oh my goodness. It is so hard to sort. It's so hard to sort because we don't really get good feedback on what's too much and what's too little, right? In fact, it's actually asymmetric because when we do get feedback, we get feedback on TMI, but we don't really get we don't really get any feedback on TLI because it's the silent thing, right? So TMI, we
Yeah.
can all relate to that, what I call a disclosure hangover, that gut wrenching, the cringe, the feeling the next morning of like, oh my God, I said too much. Um, but when it comes to TLI, the mistakes of TLI are in the form of missed opportunities, right? They're intimacy, closeness we never got. And so we don't really even code them as failures sometimes. We don't even know what's happening.
They're silent.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a lot of silence around
there
it.
really is.
And in my intro I talked about dodging questions even,
Mhm.
and I think people do that on a constant basis. If they do, they just sidestep very
Yeah,
gracefully.
yeah,
Yeah, it's ingrained, I
it
think,
is.
to LI.
It is. And
Yeah,
we don't even notice when people are dodging questions. We often don't even notice when we do it ourselves. It comes so instinctively.
that's
Yeah,
true. I agree
yeah.
with that completely. I was very surprised to learn there is a 2025 Psychology Today study that 1 in 6 married adults reported feeling lonely in their intimate relationship and disconnected from their spouse. You believe that the failure of many marriages is connected to being raised in emotionally suppressing homes. Please tell us
Yeah.
more.
Wow, I know that's a doozy, isn't it? Um, so there's a lot of reasons why people don't share enough, stop sharing. You're familiar with even more of them as a therapist than I am. Probably you see it all the time. From my nerdly behavioral scientist perspective, one thing that can happen in intimate relationships is that over time, people kind of slowly grow apart. And that's where some of these statistics about people being lonely in marriages come from. And one of the big reasons for this, I think, is that people really they stop connecting, they stop sharing, and that's because we think we know our partners better than we actually do. So sure, over time we do know them more. We know more of their quirks. We know even more about their personalities. But the problem is that our confidence that we know everything about them outpaces our actual knowledge. And that's, of course, where the problem begins. Because if we're overconfident that we know what their thoughts and feelings are at any given time, then we make assumptions and we stop asking and we stop sharing. And then we grow further and further apart. And one of the things that I discovered in researching for the book is this trait, a personality trait called mind reading expectations. And it refers to the extent to which it's as it sounds, it's the extent to which we expect our partners to be able to read our minds. Now when you say that out loud, you can see how, as my grandmother used to say, nutty noodle it is, right? How, like, of course people can't read your mind, but the thing is, it's insidious. Like, we assume implicitly that our partner should just know what we're thinking and feeling. And so if we have these beliefs, they're kind of these overly romantic belief that, oh, they should just know everything about me and know all my thoughts and needs and I shouldn't have to communicate them. If you have to communicate them, then it's a failing, right? If that's the mindset we have, it really sets ourselves up for a lot of misunderstandings and trouble. And so when I was studying the book, researching the book, I learned, so there's even, psychologists have a scale for everything. And so they have a scale to measure mind reading expectations. And so I took it myself and
Oh,
I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm really high in this. But that was such a gift to learn about myself because once I realized that I have these expectations, then I realized, oh, I need to communicate. I need to tell my partner what my needs are. I need to ask him what he's thinking and feeling. And once I started doing that, a lot of the kind of little tiffs, the things that mount up over time, these like not so nice moments with your partner, they went away because we were actually communicating. And I learned that sometimes what feels like over communicating is just communicating. And so to get back to your initial lead in about why, like the dark, well, I made it dark, that it starts in childhood. So I of course then went down all these rabbit holes, these delightful, delicious research rabbit holes of where do these beliefs come from? Tell me about me. And I learned that one of the sources is the way we're brought up, like so many things, right? Start in our childhood, and people who are brought up in homes where people don't really talk about feelings much, they don't talk about emotions, they kind of leave things implicit. Children then internalize that that this isn't something we do, and then you internalize, oh well, it's not something we do because we should just know. And so that's one of the sources of these beliefs.
In our family, I remember my brother got in trouble. I don't know what happened to this day. I have no idea what he did, but it was all between my mom and dad and him,
Right.
of course, and it was bad apparently. But there was no more conversation. That was
Yeah.
it. And my grandfather died, and I didn't know for a while because my mother was too upset to talk about it with us. But that keeping things in is such a WASP culture
Completely.
that I grew up in,
Completely.
and it doesn't work very
No,
well.
it doesn't. It doesn't. I think the trouble kind of really mounts up over time, right? It's not like a single
Yes.
dramatic thing,
No.
right? That's why it's sneaky.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the idea about mind reading expectations, which I actually have never heard before because and even my guest yesterday who was a neuroscientist, and he just off the cuff said, the secret to a happy marriage is low
Yes.
expectations.
I
And I
so
love
agree.
that. I completely
Yeah.
agree. And I think people think of that as no expectations,
Right.
and how can we do that? But it's that secret sauce, is that middle ground between none and too many,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
articulating them and changing them based on the person you're with.
Yeah.
And I think we are overconfident, and I think overconfidence erases curiosity, because a lot
Yeah.
of what I bring as a therapist is, let's have a little more
Yeah.
curiosity about this,
Yeah.
you know?
Totally. And it is amazing how like one of the things I've been learning in asking my husband more about what he's thinking and feeling is that like it's amazing the dramatically different perspective someone brings, right? Like, so you're like brooding, like, oh, he's such a jerk because whatever thing. And then I ask him what's going through his mind, and he has a totally different take on the situation, which is completely reasonable, right? Like, and then I've been learning, turns out that most of the time, a lot people don't have malevolent intentions. They don't really want to be mean. They just have a different take on it, and and if you make assumptions, then you're like, then you interpret them in the wrong way.
Absolutely. And I think it's the differences that make us more interesting
Yeah,
together.
totally.
The periodontist person with my husband, we have different names because I'm a
Love
feminist.
it. Yeah.
And she said, "You're married to Rhoda?" And I think it's because we're so different. We're
Yeah.
just such different people.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
in fact, I changed the periodontist's practice. He's thanking me because I told him it was getting too machine-like, and he wasn't. But I'm a very
Yeah.
TMI
Same.
tendency person,
Same. Same.
But people really appreciate it later. Maybe not in the
Yeah.
moment, but later people know they can trust me and count on me. And that was my reputation as a therapist
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
I'm not going to shy away from telling you the tough
Yeah.
stuff because that's where we grow,
Totally. I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thrilled with the idea that you're writing this book about opening up, because it's not something that's written about. And thinking about this is such an important communication thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's a wonderful thing that you did.
Thank you.
I found it fascinating when you cited the research study, and I'm going to kill the names, Slepian, Chun, and Mason,
Perfect.
that found that people keep on average 13 secrets. That fascinated me. So it's clear that so many of us choose silence as armor. Would you talk about why that's such a popular activity?
Oh, the secret keeping, I know. Well, it's kind of an activity that compounds itself, right? Because like if we
Yes.
keep a secret, then obviously we don't say anything, and then it feels more anomalous, and then we think that we're the weird ones, right? And we're the only ones that have like sexual fantasies. We're just like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. I'm not saying we should like always go out and tell everyone these things, but when we keep these things secret, it feels like they're more anomalous and even problematic than. And it also, there's tons of research on how when the process of keeping a secret is it's not inert, it's extremely active and draining, right? Think about it. When you need to, when you are trying to not say something, you got to monitor yourself. You have to think, oh, are we going near this topic? And it's exhausting, and that really takes a toll on us.
Yes, I think it does. And I think a lot of times secret keeping is connected to shame.
100%.
And I think that people can diffuse the shame by opening up and
Yeah.
sharing. And that's, as I mentioned in the intro, that's why AA I think is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
People share their
Right.
stories and it diminishes that
Right.
shame. So it's exactly the opposite of what we need to do to be close to somebody.
Completely. Yeah, and then you can think about like one thing that comes to mind when you said I think shame is that hits the nail on the head. That's a huge reason why. And there's something I call a catalyst confession, which is when someone of typically who's a leader, a really respected, high status, when they say something that's vulnerable, but that lots of people feel secretly, it can really help to destigmatize things. You can think of a classic example being Magic Johnson, right? In the 90s, when he announced that he was HIV positive, at the
That's right.
time it was known as the gay disease. And when he came out with this, and people had all kinds of misunderstandings about it, that like if you shook hands with someone, and so it was really stigmatizing. And then he came out with it, and he helped to take the shame away from it, because he was a very, revered person, high status, and he came out with that. And then there have been studies that have looked at pre-post, so after he made that announcement, they tracked HIV testing rates, and the researchers concluded that he probably caused about 900 people who wouldn't have otherwise gotten tested to get tested. Yeah.
Wow.
So you really can
That's
make a change.
really
Yeah.
I always thought one of Hillary Clinton's problems was that she came across completely intact.
Yes.
That they're just,
I know. I
intact.
just
And
wanted
that
to
there was,
shake her and be like, girl, come on. Like, you're crazy competent. Like, just please, like, just let loose a little bit.
I, I think, I think in our
Yeah.
culture, and particularly now, our culture and lying and vulnerability is the
Yeah.
opposite of so much. And it's as if strength is about hiding and being
Yeah.
tough, but
Yeah.
courage and strength are really about being vulnerable and being
Yeah.
honest and admitting when you've messed up. I've had some moments in therapy where I've said something very vulnerable, like, well, I'm not really sure what to do at this
Yeah.
moment. And it immediately creates more of a
Yes.
connection,
Yes.
and so I think it's such an important thing, and people, that's why I think the book is important. I really
Thank
do.
you. And there's one thing that you made me think of, which is there's an interesting study where they look, because one thing that I've always, because I am a huge fan of therapy. I think it's the greatest thing ever. And I've grown so much, and it's helped me through so many things in my life. But one of the things I've wondered is, the kind of Freudian view of arm's length, like and then the more humanistic kind of therapy where the therapist is reveals and stuff. And so there was a study where they actually randomized therapists to open up a little bit, like to self-disclose versus not, and then they measured outcomes, and they found that, yeah, sure enough, the therapist that engaged in some self-disclosure, obviously you're not saying everything, but the ones, it's associated with better outcomes. It's cool. Yeah.
I did a workshop a while back, a long while
Mhm.
back actually, and I talked about it, and I didn't have a research study to
Ah,
cite, but I said, I'm not, and if I tell a vulnerable story, it's not for my benefit. That's part of how you make the choice. It's
yeah.
for the client's benefit,
Yeah.
and I don't go into details,
Right.
but saying a little bit
Hmm.
really helps people
Hmm.
feel, wow, that happened to her too, or this is
Right.
something she
Right.
understands, or whatever.
Right.
And I took so much guff from people
Oh,
about it. It was
really?
really funny.
Really?
Oh yeah,
What were
this
their
is a long
objections?
time ago. Yeah, well, they just said because a lot of them were psychologists, and I'm a social worker, and I think social workers do a little more of. I heard an author speak a long time ago, and she said, they talk about female authors and male authors. I think it's warm authors and cold authors, and I think there's value to distance certainly, and I think again the sweet spot is in the middle, and social workers make their mistakes out of too much warmth and too much.
Yes.
And psychologists make their mistakes out of too much distance. And I think it's that messy middle ground. But that's what I was trying to open up a little bit back in those days.
Right.
Yeah.
You're such a trailblazer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right.
And it's intentional, what you're saying. Like, it's intentional sharing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It isn't like spilling out. And I always wished my kids could come on that bring your kid to work day. I'd say, I am my best self in that room.
Totally.
I really am,
Totally. Yeah.
And I am, it's a different way of being. And at home, I'm grumpy in the mornings, that's for sure. So I wanted you to talk a little more about the disclosure hangover that you mentioned earlier, because the sting of TMI is so feared versus the minimization of the ache of TLI. And I just wanted to land on that a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So, the sting of a TMI, the sting of a disclosure hangover is very real. But the mistake we make is that disclosure hangovers, like real hangovers, are usually mercifully short-lived. So, but the problem is that we fail to appreciate that, right? So when I'm thinking, oh, am I going to share this embarrassing story? Am I going to tell this person how I really feel? You think, oh, it's going to be cringy and I'm never going to recover. But it turns out we actually adapt much more quickly than we think we do. And this applies to both good things, like we get a raise or whatever. We think we'll be happy forever because of it when it's shorter lived than we anticipate. But the good news for disclosure hangovers is that they're real. They hurt in the moment, but they are shorter lived than we think. And we also often benefit from, the whole book is largely about the benefits we get. So me sharing embarrassing stories to people, I shared a very embarrassing story once. And the next morning I had the disclosure hangover of disclosure hangovers. But then the people that I revealed it to, this very embarrassing story, two of them became very close mentors of mine. One of them, I think, is a huge reason why I ended up getting my job at Harvard. So there's something again, that's really bonding and connecting. And it really, in a way, it models confidence. Not that I felt confident or I wasn't being strategic in sharing the story in the moment. It was kind of a blurt, but it ended up having these long-term positive outcomes.
And that does not surprise me. You made a really important distinction that being talkative is not the same as being revealing. And I thought that was really great. So would you talk about that?
Sure. So, we think about extroversion. So one of the questions I'm often asked is, tell me about me, as in, are there certain traits, personality traits, that are associated with being more self-disclosive? And yes, there are. We did research to look at this question. And when you ask people most commonly say extroversion, right? So people who are outgoing socially. But it turns out that that's not predictive of comfort opening up, because being talkative isn't the same as opening up. When you think about it, think about the extroverts in your life. They're lovely to be around because they're talkative and they're gregarious. But when you think about it, are they really revealing, are they opening up about their thoughts and feelings more than other people? And no, it's not actually associated. In fact, one of my very best friends, she's extremely extroverted, and she herself, she really struggles to open up and be vulnerable. And I'm actually introverted. I know that sometimes comes as a surprise, because when I talk to people about things I'm excited about, like now, I seem like I'm extroverted, but I really am a cat who likes to be alone and read. But the personality trait that is associated with opening up is a trait called agreeableness, which is, I mean, you could think of it as how easygoing someone is. But a core part of being agreeable is people who are really agreeable, they're really trusting. They really trust, really in their soul, implicitly, that others are going to react in reasonable, kind ways to them, whether naively or not. People who are agreeable are high in trust. And when you think about it, opening up, getting really vulnerable, it requires, like, you're relinquishing control to the universe. It requires,
That's
if you
right.
trust others, that comes more naturally.
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. You described figuring out the flexibility of being able to share and reveal yourself in one story using Goldilocks, which I loved. And in another, being clear that we have to find the ability to adjust our level of disclosure based on who we are with, where we are, and what the moment demands. Would you talk about this?
Yeah, so I guess one way to describe the Goldilocks, that sweet spot between TMI and TLI, I mean, it requires a lot of situational and self awareness, right? You need to first know your own tendency. Am I someone who tends to be a revealer? Do I err more on TMI or do I err more on TLI? But it also requires a lot of situational awareness. And one of my favorite ways of showing this is a story about the 1997 Miss Universe competition. And I know you're like, "Ooh," a feminist, like, "Ooh, objectification of women." And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of thoughts about beauty pageants. I find them fascinating.
Maybe we should do an
I
episode.
know. Oh my gosh.
Sounds
I
really
have so
interesting.
many thoughts,
Okay.
good, bad, and ugly. So,
Okay.
so the in the end it comes down to a final question, and there's three candidates, and it's a hard question that you have to answer live. It's super high stakes, and there's no right answers, but there's lots of wrong ones. And so in 1997 the Miss Universe competition came down to the final question, which was, if you could do anything you wanted to for a day, what would it be? And there's three candidates, and one of them is TLI. She says something that's very safe, but safety doesn't really make you likable and relatable. So it was something like, I'd travel. Another one said, I would be free and wear no clothes for the day, which is like that. That's TMI, right? It's like a conservative beauty pageant crowd.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
may be, I felt so bad for her when she said that. And you could tell that she was like, oh no. And then she tries to like backpedal, and um and but then the Goldilocks answer, this was amazing. Miss USA, Obvi. Brooke Mahalani Lee, she comes up, and so they're in this like soundproof chamber, and so she comes out, and the question's asked, and she says, I would eat everything in the world. And she's like, you do not understand. I would eat everything twice. And everyone's like completely in stitches. And so it was the perfect answer, right? Because it's like, it's
Yeah.
not
That
risque, but
is.
it's not nothing. It's not bland. It's surprising, and it's a vulnerable thing to say, right? These people who you're supposed to be so control and pride. So she's being human and relatable, and she won. And so, but when you think about it, so that is the sweet spot there. But you can think about, like, if she was in a different context, if she was with people that are like struggling with their weight or self-esteem, then someone who's like completely gorgeous and svelte, like that would be TMI for sure. So yeah, and
It really is
it's so
complicated.
complicated, and it's not like it's you're going to make a decision and it's going to be a static thing. It's, you have to keep revisiting these. It's very dynamic, right? But that's why I find it so fascinating too.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's a great story. It really is. I love it.
Oh, can I say one more thing about that story?
Yes,
Since we're
absolutely.
like
Yes.
feminists here. Okay, so I then managed to track her down, and I
Oh,
cold emailed her. She lives in Hawaii. And I said, will you talk to me? I'm a random person doing a book. And she was so generous. And so we talked for like an hour. And she's still, and this was like 30 something years after the pageant, right? And I
Oh,
asked her to like walk me through like what were you thinking, and like as I we watched the video together, and it turns out she said, yeah, it was like an unfiltered blurt for sure, but also it was a statement because Donald Trump had just bought Miss Universe, I think, and he was thinking about adding a weight clause so that the winner like would be fired if they gained a certain amount of weight. And so she's like, it wasn't just this, it was a playful thing, but it was also a statement. It was a catalyst confession because she's like, no, I want to say, look, we can't be body shaming people. We have to let people eat whatever they want. And so that even added more admiration, right? Like
oh, depth and made it three
totally.
dimensional. I mean, hers three dimensional.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a great
I
ending.
know.
Is that in your book? I don't
It's
remember
at
that
the end.
part.
It goes so. I know it's
Oh,
hard to remember because the beginning is the first chapter is like Goldilocks, and then in the leadership chapter, I talk about Magic Johnson, and then I
okay.
go back to her. So
Okay.
she's my
Okay.
hero.
That's why I missed it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That is really a great part. All right. You talk about the joy of self disclosure because I'm certain that many are cringing at the idea and still not convinced. What are the rewards?
Yeah, definitely. Undersharers out there, I get it. So let me give you some data on this because if I was like very skeptical, like, oh, this is all woo woo sharing
Yeah,
vulnerability.
yeah, yeah. And I am so not a woo woo person.
Exactly,
I'm not.
exactly.
I
No,
really like substance and
totally,
facts
totally,
and
totally.
yeah,
So
yeah.
in this study, what they did was they put people in an fMRI machine. So they put them they're scanning their brains, and an fMRI machine is a special MRI machine where it tells you like basically what areas of your brain are using the most glucose. So what areas are most active. And so, there's, as you know, there's parts of the brain that are associated with like logic and reasoning, and then there's parts of the brain associated with pleasure and on all kinds of other regions that I don't even know about, I'm sure. And what they did was they randomized people to they gave them a bunch of questions like, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? And they either asked the person in the scanner to give their own answer, like mine is Tiger Tail, which is kind of an obscure ice cream flavor that we have in Canada that's orange sherbet and black licorice. But anyways, so you'd answer it what your own answer is, or the other half of people had to answer like what they thought a friend's answer would be. And so basically half of the people are engaging in self-disclosure and the other half are not self-disclosing. And what they found was that the people who were self-disclosing, just random people, so there's undersharers, oversharers, there's everyone in this group, in general, when you get to share about yourself, when you self-disclose, the pleasure centers of your brain are more likely to be active than when you don't self-disclose. So that's where like it literally is pleasurable. It is joyful. I'm not saying that everything, you know, saying to my ex that I thought we should get a divorce, that was not pleasurable in any way, but 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 there's aspects of it that really are fundamentally pleasurable and rewarding. And when you think about it, it makes sense, right? Because
Yes.
revealing, revealing is a really important way of developing relationships because it's the core of trust, which is the core of like communities, and we're herb creatures, we're herd animals, and we need that. We really do. So it's really fundamental.
And we want to feel seen.
Yeah, for sure.
We really, I
Yeah.
mean, I've always thought that one of the hard parts back in the day when I was younger of gay culture was that parents didn't want to know.
Yeah.
And people do want to be known and people do want to be seen. And that was one of the hardest things for my friends at that time who were gay
Yeah.
was families not talking about
Yeah.
it. And so I think it's just almost a primal need to be seen. And so here we are covering up and covering up and covering up. And what you're talking about to me is the way, the path to truly being seen. And of course, you're going to be choiceful about that with the people that you feel you can
Yeah.
trust. But I think it's such an important path. I really
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
I think it's a big deal. You describe 80% of dying people's top regrets in life as the things they wish they had done,
Yeah.
not the things they hadn't done.
Yeah.
Please tie this into the work of self-disclosure and why it's worth it.
Yeah, so I came across the work of a palliative care nurse by the name of Bronnie Ware. And so she has spent many, many hours being with people at the end of their lives, and she wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And 4 out of 5 of those regrets were about things people didn't do. They weren't about regrets they had done. They weren't about things that they'd
Yes.
done that they wish they hadn't done. They were about things that they hadn't done or hadn't said and they wish they had. So 4 out of 5. Number 3 was I wish I had shared my feelings more. So the third most common regret she found is a regret of TLI, of not having shared your feelings. So that, I mean, that really struck me, and it's really changed the way I operate. So I had a scare with my mom a couple years ago, and that was around the time I was becoming familiar with Bronnie Ware's work, and it prompted me to write her a letter saying, these are all the things I love about you. And, I'm not planning on her passing anytime soon, but I don't want things unsaid.
I experienced that with my father-in-law with the opposite effect.
Yeah.
I wrote him a letter and I said, I talked about him, but I talked about stories he didn't know about my husband. And I thought he would like to know these
I love
stories.
that.
And he never talked to me about it. But he told my husband, this is what happened. He read the letter and he twisted it into he wasn't a good enough father.
Oh no.
I will never forget that as long as I live. And I was so sad because we thought he was dying many times,
Yeah.
but I really was trying to give him a little gift
Yeah.
of being able to see his son a little bit differently
Yeah.
than he might have experience of.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. But I think that's about his insecurities and he was dying and all of that. But I was so sad that I had messed up,
Oh,
with good intentions,
right.
of course, which I do believe paved the path to hell.
Right.
So but it was really it backfired, and I share that just to say this is such a complicated thing, but even being able to just experiment with stepping into self-disclosure a little more, and I think even. I'm watching Victoria on PBS, and
cool.
I didn't know she was really in love with Albert. That was kind of cool to find out. But the way they do this dance of knowing each other and how they're different and being honest with each other, and it does create some tension because you've got to soften the edges of those differences. But I am very impressed with their revealing back and forth, and it's really lovely. It's a lovely dance to watch. Oh, and I wanted to tell you about a book because you said you're a reader. My favorite book of 2025, Chain Gang All
Oh,
Stars.
never heard of it. Let me write that down.
Yeah. So I love telling people about books. Anyway, is there anything we haven't covered you'd like my audience to know? And then let people know again the title of your book and anything else.
Okay. Well, one other thing that came to mind as you were talking about being really known is and I know you like data, is some fascinating research. It's by Bill Swan, psychologist, and it's called self-verification. And what he finds is in close relationships, so it speaks to the importance of feeling known for who you really are. And what he finds is that that's so important that the couples that when they feel like their partner really knows them, warts and all, so they actually have stronger marriages, they're more likely to stay together, and that even means I would prefer it. So suppose I have low self-esteem. I am happier if I feel that my partner really understands that I have low self-esteem relative to if my partner has this like idealized view of, oh, she's got such high self-esteem. She's so like, right? It's not saying that I want them to endorse that I should have, but even when you want to be understood so badly that you even want them to know all your warts, right? That's better than some idealized view. That's what predicts longevity more than idealization, which I found fascinating.
All right. And so the name of your book.
Oh, yes. Right. So the name of my book is Revealing the Underrated Power of Oversharing. And the other thing I wanted to share is some of the quizzes we talked about. So like the mind reading expectations and the personality quiz. If you're curious, you can go to my website at lesliekjohn.com/quiz and you can take some quizzes for yourself.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. Before you go, consider this your nudge to text someone you trust and say the thing you usually keep to yourself, or at least notice what comes up when you think about it. Vulnerability doesn't require a dramatic monologue. Sometimes it's just one honest sentence. Another option is to make a list of 50 to 75 people from your life and then write down one thing, positive or negative, that you wish you had shared and said aloud. It could be the mailman or your Sunday school teacher. Thank you for spending this time with me today, and I'll see you next time for another conversation that helps us connect a little more deeply.
Thank you for listening to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes and help get the word out. To learn more or connect with Rhoda, visit therapyideas.net.